Hey there, welcome to episode 7 of UNSTUCK Kids Speak Out. I'm Chris Bear, producer of the film UNSTUCK, an OCD kids movie, and really happy to have this special episode. We've done 6 before, each one with a kid with OCD, and this time we're going to do 2 things we haven't done before. One, we're going to have 2 guests on, and secondly, they're both siblings. So I know that it can be really hard for siblings that have to deal with when their brother or sister has OCD. OCD tends to really disrupt the family. So today we're going to be speaking with Zach and then Matt about their how they dealt with OCD as siblings, advice they have, and things like that. And clearly we can take any of your comments and questions that you have. We're going to have Zach on in a little bit. As soon as he sees the broadcast, I'm going to invite him in, and then we'll get going. So thank you for being here. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to add comments, share this out, like and hit the buttons and all that stuff. Tell your friends about it. The more people that see it, the more help we can get to the community. So, Zach, if you're here, just send me the note. I think last time it worked better if you invited me. I invited. So you should be getting a note right now. And we're going to have Zach on in a second. Hey, Zach.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you? Can you turn the phone?
Yeah. Okay.
Very cool. Thanks for joining in today. I really appreciate it.
Oh. Let me see. You're cutting out a bit. I'm going to go outside.
Okay.
Can you?
Hey,
wait,
Matt,
can you? Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
All good. Thanks.
Okay.
So thank you so much for agreeing to come on. This is awesome. I'm so glad to have to you here and hear your perspective on OCD and give people out there a chance to kind of ask questions if they want. But I would kind of love to know, just from the get-go, the first time you realized your sister, was going through something, and kind of how you learned about OCD.
How did I learn about OCD? Well, I feel like most people do who aren't put in this situation, I started out with kind of a stereotypical view of OCD and didn't even see it as a bad thing. So that I felt like I knew about OCD. And then when my sister got diagnosed with OCD, I want to say it was relatively recent, 6 to 8 months ago. Not more than a year ago. My kind of what I knew about OCD, or what I thought I knew, changed definitely. And so I did some research on my own, and then with the help of her, and I learned, that OCD can manifest itself in various different forms, and that against common belief, it's not actually. I think a lot of people think of it as almost a good thing, even who don't really know what they're talking about. They think, oh, you're just naturally clean and cleanly, or and have good. So a lot of people see it as a positive thing, and I learned, that is not the case. It's a very negative thing. But yeah, so it's probably been 8 or 9 months since then.
And when your sister was going, when kind of you first realized was it disruptive in your life? How did OCD affect you as a sibling? Your sister's going through this severe anxiety, and how did it kind of influence, affect, and change, what you were doing?
It definitely changed family dynamic. Because my sister was always really productive in the house. She was always, working. She was doing things. So she wasn't really there. She was just such, she kind of brought the family together. And she was, she has great personality. She's really likable and funny, and we were always talking. And so I didn't have her there, and it felt like the family kind of felt incomplete. And a lot of that also had to do with the fact that my mom was having to commute up to Stanford originally, which is a couple-hour drive. So it really, and first of all, and the big thing is the family wasn't complete. I didn't have, my sister there. But then also my mom was having to commute up to this program, and then eventually going even farther away when we found out that wasn't the right place. So it definitely kind of fractured the family, I would say.
Yeah, I think that's a consistent thing that most siblings would talk about. If you're just joining, we're talking to Zach here about his sibling and how siblings are affected by OCD. Feel free to add a comment or share this out. And he's just explaining kind of how, as it generally does, OCD kind of affects the whole family, and that, part of the thing that was going on in his life was less parental. His parents were distracted because his parents had to help his sister, and she clearly was a glue to the family, and wasn't able to be around as much. And so did your relationship with your sister change at all? Did she get scared of you at all? Were you happen to be like a trigger for some of her issues?
I can't say that I was directly a trigger, but definitely some of my actions resulted in these OCD symptoms and almost panic attacks. Well, not almost panic attacks, panic attacks. And our relationship did change. I tried not to let it, affect our relationship, but she wasn't there for so long. And when she was there, she seemed kind of distant because she had to, she was focused on this thing that was controlling her, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely changed, and I wasn't really sure how to talk to her, how to, what I should do about it, if I should be tough with her and not let her give in to her compulsions, or if I should just try and be as nice as possible. And I wasn't sure, how to separate the treatment and what I was supposed to be doing with her from our normal relationship.
Right. I mean, it's a confusing time. Hi, Brand. I'm just ask your question. We're talking about obsessive compulsive disorder and how it affects kids. Zach's sister has it. So normally we talk to a kid with OCD and that kind of get their perspective on how it affects them. And this time I really wanted to talk to siblings and get their opinions and feelings on it, because OCD does affect, one person, but it actually really can wrap the whole family and affect a lot of family dynamics. So that's kind of what we're talking here today. So Zach, how did you get around? You just said you weren't sure, how to deal with your sister. Wasn't, I'm sure there was times when you were like, I'm not sure if I say something or do something, this is going to set it off. You're kind of walking on eggshells a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
What did you read up on OCD? Was she open about it, so you were able to kind of figure out certain things and navigate it at least till she found therapy?
Yeah, I did do some research on OCD, and my mom really took the research full on. I know she watched your documentary and read multiple books on OCD, and yeah, really invested her time fully in researching and finding the right care facilities. So she educated me, and I did do some research on my own, but definitely she helped educate me. And then my sister, she was understandably, she was open, but she wasn't, wanting to share everything about her, because I think she saw it as this abnormality, this thing that maybe she should even be ashamed of. And I don't know what contributed to that. I think it was just, a break from the norm, what, we expected of her and all that. So she was willing to share to some extent, but I don't think she ever fully opened up about everything, at least to me.
Did you ever go to her therapist together, or talk about what she was learning in therapy at all?
Yeah, we did. I wasn't involved until a little bit later on. She went to the facility in Wisconsin, Rogers, and there I went to Wisconsin to visit her for a week, and did a lot of video calls with the therapist. And so, yeah, we did. I would say that definitely came later, and it was more my parents who supervised the care early on, especially because I had school and she was farther away from, she was, a good deal away, LA and Wisconsin.
Yeah.
so I couldn't really visit her. I visited her in Los Angeles over Christmas, but it was hard to talk to her. So, but I talked to her on the phone and that kind of thing. But
Yeah, and the video chats that you were doing, was it like therapist instructed? Was the therapist talking to you about her treatments specifically, or was it really just like, news from home, cheering up, things like that?
yeah, let's see. It was kind of both. A lot of it was, she gets to talk to her family, she misses us and all that. But she definitely did. Um, we definitely did talk about, the treatment and that kind of thing. At least with the therapist, we did talk independently with my sister, but yeah, we talked about treatment. I'm trying to think. Can't remember exactly.
Yeah, they do work a lot on exposure therapy at Rogers. It is a pretty intensive treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sure it took a little adjustment for her, but I do know that there are a lot of other kids that are there, and hopefully that like camaraderie that she can build with and understand that there are other kids that are like her will help, because I do know they do work on exposures together, which is cool. Did the therapist at all talk to you about, okay, when she comes home or when things are home, how you can handle it, or like like your mental health state?
It was not a center of conversation. I think the main focus, she didn't, once she went to Wisconsin, it was only us visiting her. She never went home. And I think it was kind of so far in the future that it wasn't crossing our minds too much. But yeah, she definitely did tell us when we visited her just not to really give in to her demands. And there was a list of things that she had to check off when she was with us, with certain exposures and that kind of thing.
What are you able to share kind of some of the things that she had to work on? The reason I ask is I've talked to other siblings and other kids in the past, and there always seems to be like, my brother or sister wanted to help, and this is the way the person with OCD felt they could help. So that's why I'm curious.
Well, her compulsions were symmetry based, so everything had to be like touch her evenly. Basically, is the simplest way of explaining it. It was ultimately kind of about control, I would say, and she wanted to have control over the environment, which I think is common for OCD. And so there were things like, we'd have to give her side hugs on one side of her body, and then she couldn't give us a hug on the other side, or opening the door, she'd have to open doors one-handed, and just things that she'd have to interact with the world in a non-symmetrical way.
Did she ever ask you to do things for her? Like, can you open the door for me? The hug, oh, now you have to hug me. Like, were you ever instructed really by OCD to do different things for her?
Initially, yes, definitely. When she was before she went to Rogers, um, yeah, she definitely would tell me to, if I bumped into her, to bump into her on the other side. And at that point in time, I was kind of afraid of causing a panic attack. So early on in that early on stage, I complied mostly
Yeah.
because it was, she was far away from any treatment center. We live out in the country, so there wasn't anywhere nearby that we could take her if something were to happen. And it was
Accommodation is so normal, and I think it's probably people's first response, whether
mm-hmm.
you're a parent or, a sibling, any loved one. You don't want your person that you know and love to be in pain and go through this serious anxiety. So you're like, how quickly can we help you get over it?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like what you're kind of learning now, probably as well as she's learning, is that that's not what you have to do.
Yeah.
Or you have to figure out how to back away from doing that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yeah, and that was that was definitely part of the exposure therapy. Was just there, she had things she had to do, like hop on one foot, but also just in a general, just keeping her from evening out is what she called it. So yeah.
Yeah, having things kind of just right and perfect is like,
mm-hmm.
It's hard because you will catch yourself sometimes doing it. And hopefully what we found with treatment is that it's not about curing you, so to speak. It's just understanding and being more aware of what your issues are and what maybe new issues are, so that you can kind of figure out ways to fight against them.
Well,
if you're just joining us, we're doing Siblings Speak Out today. We're talking to siblings of those with OCD, and therefore getting their perspective on it and getting their advice. And this is Zach. We're talking to him first, and then in a little while we'll have somebody else jump on. So if you got any questions, any advice, or anything you want to ask, feel free to throw in a comment or, share it out. We really appreciate it. And this is always helpful for me because as a parent of somebody with OCD, I'm always looking for tips and tricks and ideas. And so, part of this is a little bit selfish here for me because I get to, pick your brain too. So you talked about a little bit how you realized OCD was affecting you, and I'm sure one day your parents sat you down and said, your sister has OCD and this is what it is. Do you remember how you reacted about it, and were you concerned or scared, or how did you react?
it was definitely kind of all of the above. I wasn't sure. Well, first of all, like I said, I didn't really know fully what OCD was at the time before I was informed, so it was kind of confusing on that regard. And it had always actually been kind of a joke with my sister before the family had understood what OCD was, because she was a neat, tidy person who was high-strung. It's like, oh, Scarlett's a bit OCD, which is kind of a common thing that I'm now, I'll have friends say that in conversation and I want to punch them. No, joking there, obviously. But it was always kind of a joke, and my parents said she's OCD, and I didn't really understand what that meant, and they explained it to me, and I was still definitely confused. But seeing how seriously they were taking it, and obviously seeing the symptoms in my sister, I was definitely scared for her and wanted her to, do the best that she could. I don't know, it's hard to say exactly what I was feeling at the time, but it was just kind of a mix of emotions. It was not really one over, dominant emotion.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a overarching need that you want to help your sister get better. So that's, and you don't know what it is yet, so you have to get educated on it. You did mention that your mom read some books about it. Your parents saw the film. Were you able to see the film at all? Did they show it to you as a way to educate you and say this is kind of what's going on?
I didn't, unfortunately. I saw some other documentaries that I can't say that they were similar because obviously I didn't see the film, but I'm really interested in medicine. I'm wanting to go on and be a doctor, and I saw a lot of the videos from more of like a neurological explanation of what was going on, and I thought that really helped because I was able to understand that it's not, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it's not that my sister really has a choice. It's just this is who she is, and she's going to need this help. She's not, just choosing to do this. And I felt like that helped. Yeah. But my mom mostly relayed the information to me about the film.
I would, after we're done, it would be cool if you could either like in the comments section, find a video or the link to one of those videos or any of those videos you were talking about and throw them up there, because I would love to take a look at it. And I'm sure other people would as well.
Okay.
I think it's interesting that was your approach, because there is a lot of one of the things that our therapist first did with Vanessa was kind of walk her through that kind of neurological information and talk to her about her brain, and it totally threw her off. And she took it as like, oh wait, you want to take out my brain and put in another brain's, and she totally wasn't ready for like the biological information and genetic information about OCD. So we kind of shifted and pivoted and moved to like the exposure therapy and stuff, and less about talking and more about doing. But what it helped you get educated was the reverse, looking into the brain and figuring out like how OCD works. I mean, I know there's been some genetic studies about it. But it would be really great to throw some of those video links, because I would love to take a look at it. If anybody has a question, feel free. Here's a question right now. can you help us understand what became the difference for you and your sister when it came to supporting her versus enabling? So, like, you know, when you clearly were accommodating, and then you understood that, you know, that was not the right thing to do. So maybe explains some of the things that you did to pull back on accommodating, or some of the things you realized you couldn't do anymore.
Well, I think, let's see. I think it was understanding that despite this pain that she was showing when I wouldn't accommodate for her, that it was actually in the long run causing her more pain and more grief, accommodating for her, because it's gonna, keep her in this position for longer. So I think it was, understanding that once I get over this initial hurdle of not accommodating for her and seeing her, in a bad shape, that it will actually make things better. And, especially after a while, I saw that, that in motion. It was little things like, she'd go and open a door handle one-handed, which she would never do. Or, trying to think, one trigger for her was sitting in a car, because the car seat is not in the middle of the car, and she would do ordinary things like that, and not really complain about it. So seeing that really helped, but it was just, it was short term versus long term, as this person in the comments is saying.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting that, and it can be it's so hard speaking as a parent, and I'm sure you can relate, because you're seeing somebody, you don't do this, and, you suddenly see your, in my case, my daughter, but your sister, like, pleading with you or help, like, this pain on their faces, but then you have to step back and at the same time go, wait a minute, I have to believe that doing this in the short term is not what I have to do. I have to look for the long-term goal. And then clearly you're acting on that, belief has helped her, and you've seen it work. So that, in some ways the therapy works, but it is hard to the point that, Raquel, that you were asking. It's very hard in the beginning to really, as a parent, because you're a natural OCD therapy, like, goes against your natural instincts, which are, I want to comfort and feel and help you get over this anxiety as quick as possible and do whatever I can. And the treatment basically is to learn not to do that. That your person with OCD has to learn to deal with that anxiety, has to learn to sit with that anxiety, has to learn to face that anxiety, not, necessarily jump into the thing that's most hardest for them. They work up to it, but you kind of have to let them feel that pain. And part of that is you not helping, and you figuring out a way to distance yourself from not accommodating or not helping them do different things. And it's really hard for both to learn how to do that. You were just, some of your observations, that was a really interesting observation about putting kind of education into action. Did you happen to learn that through talking with the therapist? Was it something that you'd read, or, something that your sister told you?
It was kind of a mix of the three. I know talking with the therapist really helped, because she was able to give me kind of like what to expect and what to do, just basic things. Honestly, sorry.
No worries.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of the three, but the therapist definitely played a big role, and it was somebody I was able to, understand. This person really knows what is best for my sister, and this is the person to listen to. Whereas, my parents had kind of conflicting ideas about how to handle it. My mom wanted to kind of accommodate for my sister until we were able to get her to a proper care facility, and my dad wanted to really hammer down and, not accommodate at all. And I wasn't really sure who to go with at that stage. So the therapist, who I could recognize, this is the expert on treatment on OCD, when they were able to educate me, I felt like that was the big contributing, was the big factor that really helped.
Right. Now, one of the things you talked about earlier was, when your sister first was dealing with OCD and nobody knew really what it was, your family's thrown into chaos. Like, you realized that suddenly you're taking a backseat to a lot of things, or her concerns, or her panic attacks, or trumping whatever you had to do. Like, how did you navigate that? Did your parents try to carve out time for you? Were they just saying, "Look, we have to deal with her, and we're sorry"? Like, how did you kind of deal with, when things were really bad? How did you react? How were you able to kind of navigate that, and what happened?
Well, it was definitely hard. I would say some of my I understood this is a big concern. This is the main priority. And then also I've had some medical complications, not nearly as severe, and where my needs have kind of been put above those of my siblings. And
Yeah.
I understood, without that, it would have been much harder for me to recover. Um, so I kind of took that approach and almost treated her injury more like a physical injury, so I could kind of comprehend it better and
Uh-huh.
and thought about it like, she is really hurt. She needs this. She needs this time. She needs it more than I do, basically. But it
That's
was.
great.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Um,
that's great, because you actually are bringing forth something that I had read recently in a book about how, try to think about OCD, and when somebody's having an issue, as painful as a physical pain. Think about, if you broke your arm, how much that would hurt, and so imagine that as when they're going through an issue, or when they're triggered by something. That's the pain that they. So help me dimensionalize how I approached, and uh, let me reshape my thinking, and you had a similar thing, thinking that was something you did naturally, to think about, oh, it's a physical issue, and that's how I can kind of rationalize it, and help me understand what's going on.
mm-hmm.
So I wanted to ask you if you had any. I mean, there are tons of tips and ideas. So any advice that you could give to other siblings, other parents that are watching, on either how to, one, how to help handle and talk to siblings about OCD, and also like things that you would offer as advice on how to help.
Well, I would say one of the big things, because I understand it's really hard to find proper residential care facilities. So a lot of what I'm going to say is going to be, before that step, before you're able to get your loved one into a facility that has the means to properly help her.
Yeah.
Um, one of them is think about it like a physical injury. I know my dad especially was, he's raised in the 60s and 70s where there was a more antiquated view of mental illness, and wasn't really able to fully understand, and thought, just don't think about it kind of approach. Um, so it definitely is. I think thinking about it like a physical illness, she is, hurt. Think about it like, she's going through a significant amount of pain. Um, that really helped. Another thing is, as I touched on earlier, is, the long-term benefit. Think about long-term. You don't want to give in to their compulsions. You really want to try and be tough with them, but then still, love them. You want to nurture them and do what's best for them. But that not giving into their compulsions is what's best for them.
Yeah. And
Um,
it's not something that you're gonna be awesome at from day one. It does take a
mhm.
learning process. We had a question here about. So you mentioned that your father really, like, once he learned about OCD, he was like, "This is where we got to treat it. We got to go hardcore. We're gonna not accommodate at all. Go from accommodating to absolutely not." Like, so was it hard? Was it difficult for him um, to not to like pull back completely?
uh, Trying to think. I think he had. I don't know that he, like, not trying to dog my dad or anything, but I don't know that he had the greatest understanding of
Mm-hmm.
OCD. Initially, really understands it. but it's kind of hard to say exactly.
Well, I mean, sometimes, you'll read a piece of advice and you go, okay, this is what we got to do.
Yeah.
And it took me personally, Raquel, to answer your question from my point of view, from like a dad dealing with OCD. It did take us a while to understand that we couldn't go from like totally accommodating to not at all. There had to be a gradual, I'll give you an example. My daughter had a real hard time going to sleep, and for like 5 or 6 months, we would sleep with her until she fell asleep. Then we would leave, which was awful, and we hated it. And the way we started to pull back on that, and it took us 6 or 8 months to do this, was like we set a timer, and it was like, okay, we're going to do 10 minutes. Then we're going to do 9 minutes, and this was over days and weeks. And eventually we got to the point where even like there was a physical – so then we got out of her bed. And then it became a physical thing of like touching her, and we weaned off that. But it took 6 months for us to step back and to gradually kind of wean her off, if you will. And that's something we had to learn, because initially you read don't accommodate, and you're like, great, we won't anymore. We're going to go cold turkey. And it's like the worst thing you could do to OCD.
Yeah.
You have to kind of pull back, and a lot of dialogue. Did you find that your parents and your sister were doing a lot of discussions and talking about what they were going to do rather than just go do it?
Let's see. Especially my mom and my sister really talked a lot. At that stage, it was still hard for my dad to understand fully, as you were saying, you got to kind of slowly back off of this accommodation. So he just wanted to kind of just act. He just wanted to get this over with as soon as possible. And for him, that was just not accommodating at all.
Right.
And my mom, though, really focused on what was best, and she helped find Rogers and get her there. So my sister and her talked a lot about what would be best for you, and just various treatment things. And I think she tried to talk to my sister a lot about why are you doing this, which is quite a hard question to answer. And so I think not having an answer to that made my dad act a little bit more, or made him act like that a little bit more.
No, and figuring out the family dynamics is hard. I want to get to Matthew and get him on here. So, is there anything that you want to say last bit to the audience, and that might be a tip or anything like that?
Well, I would say when you're trying not to accommodate the person in the family that has OCD, don't just shut them off. You really should, they're still the loved one, they're still the same person. They're just going through a really hard time. So definitely, it's hard to, but try and do some of the same activities with them. Try and, watch movies, just show that you really care for them and that you're not just, this kind of stone wall that's just focused on them getting better.
Yeah.
So definitely, display emotions. Don't just be hard the whole time. That would be my big thing. They're still
cool.
They're still your family.
Thank you so much for joining in. Please feel free to stay on for the next hours, comment to people, whatever you want. But thank you so much for joining.
Okay.
And I really appreciate it. It's a lot of help. And now we're going to have come in a second. But I just want to answer the question, and